Okay, this is I guess a response video to my last video. Might have ruffled some feathers with the MedSurg being my recommended specialty to start with. And that's for the vast majority. Don't get me wrong. I mean, everybody has different preferences. Some people want to go right into peds, OR. I would say I had a fair amount of my classmates, friends go into OR. A couple of them had already an in, a couple went to ICU, a couple went to oncology, a couple went to like long-term care, but the vast majority went into MedSurg. I think one went to ED. It's really hard to get into our ED, our particular ED, but I had some friends go to other EDs. Other facilities of our same organization, actually, but other places to other organizations. But it's not what I recommend. It's not what most educators would recommend. I've had talks with the resident nursing resident head of, the former head of, and the former head of, and they all recommend MedSurg. One, because there's a dire need, but all, quote unquote off the record, there are certain MedSurg units they don't recommend. Like, my daughter just graduated and I was chit chatting with them and saying, what, and they're like, well, this one, not that one. And, it's not self-serving. Their advice to me was, as a friend, to say, hey, no, not that one. Go anywhere but that one. Sorry to say, I do have to supply them with people, but yeah, I'm not going to sacrifice your daughter to do that. Sorry, and ironically, my daughter opted for neuro ICU. And I was saying that to one of the commenters. So it's not that I have anything against ICU nurses or ED nurses. Not at all. I have a lot of friends in ED, a lot of friends in the ER. In ICU, my girlfriend's a NICU nurse. My daughter's a neuro ICU nurse. Absolutely, I have vested interest personally in ICU nurses. So absolutely not. And I have the highest respect for them. I think my girlfriend is a much better nurse than I am. Even if I had the same amount of years experience with her, she's a much better nurse than I am. I'm never going to make that up. It's not even a question of making it up. She's just naturally a better nurse than I am. She also has a lot more technical background. She was a respiratory therapist for 10 years before even becoming a nurse. And she's been a nurse now for 18 years. I'm going on to my 5th year soon. I just realized that I did the numbers wrong. And I was like, oh shit. It's weird because I was the COVID class. So they actually let us practice because we had emergency dispensation. They're like, you're pretty much going to pass that class, but you can get dispensation to practice as a special, I think what they called it grad nurse, but I think it was like, emergency grad nurse, whatever, as in emergency pandemic grad nurse, not like emergency room. So my license actually it comes up for renewal a few months before it was actually issued, given the normal time frame, because of that, because they took that into account. So they still counted that. They said, all right, we gave you special dispensation, so we're counting that on your time. So it's a weird renewal date for me. So I've been a nurse a couple months longer than typical graduates of my time. But going back to form, to the topic, I have nothing against ICU nurses. Absolutely nothing. I think they're great. It's a great point to start with, but I just don't personally think it's the best. And that's shared with me by the other educators, and their thinking was where I kind of based my thinking also off of. They just kind of confirmed it, in that you're taught a greater, broader base than an ICU nurse would be, or ED. So forget about ED. ICU is more closer to MedSurg in the sense that they do need to know everything, but they're much more like I said to the commenter, it's a 12-hour RT. They're dealing with that. They're not dealing with patients with an emotional IQ level that's comparable to a MedSurg. And I value emotional IQ, EQ as they call it now. That's the code. Almost as much as the objective side, the IQ side. But that's where I say, like, my girlfriend and everybody, I think, are much better nurses to me IQ wise. EQ wise, I think I'm much better than most other nurses, and that's where I kind of make up, because I'm so lacking on that one side, because I have life experience to bring to the table. That's always what I say, that is a great aspect for us older nurses. It's a great asset to have. But that's why I think MedSurg is a greater base to start, a better foundation to start with, because you have that. Whereas most ICU nurses, my friends will say, I don't want to talk to them. I want them intubated and sedated. My patient's talking back to me, like having a conversation, not just giving them shit, which some ICU nurses do have to deal with, and they just restrain them and sedate them. But they're like, I don't want to have a conversation with these people. Like, I don't want. I want to do my charting. I got another patient to deal with. I just want to give my meds, my pushes, and whatever. What? Whereas MedSurg nurses, we have to deal with 4 to 8 patients, depending on your organization and your scenario and your assignment, and you have to usually deal with all of them as awake individuals. It's like saying, okay, you have a special needs child and you're the parent. Yes, that's a lot of work. Don't get me wrong. I like I said, my girlfriend's an acute nurse. I see a lot of that, or I hear a lot of that. And a MedSurg nurse is dealing with probably 6 to 8 rambunctious children. Is that easier? No. Is it harder? No. I mean, it's different, right? And that's what I'm trying to say. And what my educator, she is almost my educator, but all my friends that train new nurses, they were saying is, it's easier to move from MedSurg to ICU than back. They definitely can. They're very qualified at that point. They're more qualified than just an average MedSurg nurse, but they have to change the way they nurse. Just like a MedSurg nurse would have to change to an ICU setting. But it's easier for time-wise for a MedSurg nurse to do that, because all of a sudden they find they have a lot of quote-unquote time on their hands, because they're dealing with 1 or 2 patients versus 8 or 6, whereas ICU nurse went from 1 to 2 to 6 or 8, and they're like, what the hell? Acuity's lower, but time is our greatest enemy as a nurse, and that's really where I was coming from. Okay, good luck, guys. Hope that answers and quiets down a lot of grief.